to ensure that we capture all the details as such. Wow, that was loud. Before we get started, though, I do just want to say a huge thanks to our team, OEO and DES team jointly. We had a great week last week with the National Governors Association Winter Workforce Symposium. A lot of great lessons learned from other states, and I think they learned quite a bit from us as well for all the great work that everybody is doing. So a huge thanks to everybody for your participation there. With that, we'll go to call to the public. At this time, we will open for public comment. The Workforce Arizona Council welcomes presentations of no more than 3 minutes in length. As a reminder, members of the council may not discuss items that are not on the agenda. Therefore, action taken as a result of public comment will be limited to directing staff to study the matter or scheduling the matter for further consideration and decision at a later date. If anyone wishes to address the council, please raise your hand in the Zoom window or indicate in the chat and you'll be unmuted to speak. Aaron, are we seeing any?
No.
Okay. Give it another sec. All right. Seeing none, we'll proceed. For approval of minutes from our last executive committee meeting from November 15th of 2022. I trust the council members have had time to look through the minutes from our last executive committee meeting. And do I have a motion to adopt the minutes as well?
This is Audrey, so moved.
Thank you, Audrey. Second?
Second, Walters.
Thank you, John. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? I heard ayes all three. The minutes are approved. Moving right along, our workforce report out. Stacy Faulkner will lead our discussion on updates and report out. So Stacy, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair Gaspers. Aaron, if you could go to the first slide for me. So I wanted to take a minute to welcome our new team members to the council. We had a couple that joined the full council in December of 2022, but we hadn't met yet, so I hadn't had an opportunity to welcome them. So I'm happy to share that we have Scott Holman, the Director of Human Resources for TSMC, joining us on the full council. Michelle Bolton, Government Relations Director for Intel. Daniel Witt, Head of the State and Local Public Policy for Lucid. And Sean Hutchinson, Training Director for Phoenix Electrical, joining us. So I'm very pleased. That does leave us with just a couple more vacancies. So you'll see that we do have a workforce vacancy. We have made recommendations to boards and commissions for that seat to be filled. We're still waiting to hear back on their response so we can move forward with the application process. And then we have 2 balance of membership vacancies. One is Jeff Leatham. So he actually let us know that he retired the beginning of February. So via email, I had an opportunity to thank him for serving on the council. But unfortunately, he's not with us today, so we can't bid him farewell. And then we do still have 1 CEO vacancy, which we hope to be filled within the next month or so, pending boards and commissions approval. Next slide, Aaron. I wanted to take an opportunity to introduce Sarah Agostino. Sarah is the new Program Oversight and Support Administrator over at DES. So those of you that are a little bit familiar with the structure over there, Sarah is actually replacing me. When I joined the OEO team, they posted the position with a little bit of a change in structure. And so I know Sarah's on the call today. We're extremely excited to have her on the DES team. We are working collaboratively with her and the Program Oversight and Support team on many of the functions that we partner on. And so I have included just a couple of bullets about what Sarah's main charge is. And I know that she has been meeting with the executive directors of each of the 12 boards to kind of, understand the work that they're doing, see where she can support. And I've also included her email address. But Sarah, I would actually like to turn it over to you just in case there are any items that you wanted to share or address to the council.
Thank you so much, Stacy. And it might get a little bit loud in my background because we've got people in the office today, which is exciting. But thank you so much for that introduction and an opportunity to meet this executive committee today. As Stacy said, I'm getting started with really digging into connecting with each of our local areas and identifying how myself and the team can really extend technical assistance and support to local areas as we continue to strengthen our collaboration and partnership. And certainly also have a tremendous amount of focus on state plan development and coordinating what those efforts will look like with a strong lens of focus on stakeholder engagement and opportunities to really define and strengthen our direction moving forward. So thank you again, Stacy, and everyone for the welcome. And as you know, you can reach me by email and I'd be more than happy to connect and discuss anything else further. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, and welcome aboard. Next slide. So I think I really wanted to share some really exciting projects with this team and then the full council in the next week or so, because we here at OEO, in partnership with DES, with the use of some of the reverted dollars this year, are making some significant investments in our workforce system. So the first one I wanted to make you aware of is our partnership with WestMec. So OEO recently invested $250,000 in CTE programming. So this is a workforce initiative that'll focus on curriculum for new programs that support industry and labor market projections, specifically semiconductor manufacturing and electric vehicle lithium battery manufacturing. Both of these will be delivered at CTED and local high school CTE locations statewide, and mostly cover the cost of the curriculum for the new programs, equipment, supplies, and of course, our teachers. So that's very exciting. The second project that we will invest in is broadband. I know broadband's been a priority for our council as it is statewide. We'll be investing $300,000 in broadband fiber optic training in partnership with Arizona Western College and Yuma County. So this initiative will provide fiber optic certificate tuition assistance, work-based learning, paid training, job placement, and support services. And it'll really work towards serving the local employers in the Yuma area, such as APS, Spectrum, Allo, and CenturyLink. The next project we have is STEM. So just recently, OEO has invested $100,000 in partnership with the SciTech Institute. And really the intent is to forge a dynamic statewide network of regional workforce hubs that would connect local educational, civic, and community institutions, people and assets within our Arizona at Work network, regional workforce centers, and organizations and employers. So we really want to make sure that this investment does reach our youth population, our underserved populations, and help them gain the knowledge to enter the workforce. The next project, which I think is pretty significant for our Northern Arizona region, is a research project that we're going to invest $100,000 in. And so I think most of us know that there are several counties in Northern Arizona that are facing the closure of the 3 coal-fired power plants over the next 10 years. And so what we wanted to do was really create some type of a research project that would help several of our prospective employers consider locating to that region. These closures will result in about 500 direct jobs and 50 million in annual wages. So if we do this right, the research will help with employer recruitment efforts that will aid in efforts to diversify the area's economic base before the power plant closures take full effect. And I do know that we are in the procurement process with that project right now. Elevate Ed AZ, I know that they actually came to our convening, the Phoenix Chamber, to do a presentation on this initiative. But I just wanted to provide an update that the Arizona Commerce Authority and OEO have invested $5 million in partnership with the Phoenix Chamber to support this initiative that will prepare individuals for college and career through stronger alignment between education, business, and industry and the community. We have actually intertwined ACRC now into this initiative. So we are really hoping to tap into those students and get them prepared with the ACRC credential as well. Next is the Good Jobs Academy. So this is just more of an update. We have an opportunity to submit an application for the Good Jobs Academy, which is the Department of Labor. I think they're launching this, and the application deadline is March 14th. But it's really an opportunity or initiative designed to specifically help communities take immediate action in regards to the U.S. Department of Labor's Good Jobs Initiative. So it will allow us to invite teams representing states, tribes, local boards, state boards, and other partners to develop strategies and action plans that would essentially address inequities through a focus on improving employment opportunities and job quality across many different industry sectors, communities, and stakeholders. So what I've done is I've sent out an email to our local boards to see who may have interest in joining an application, maybe through a regional approach with the Office of Economic Opportunity taking the lead in partnership with DES. And I have gotten some response. So it looks like we'll be able to submit an application with the full team of 5. And I think we're probably going to move forward with a focus on the semiconductor industry. And then next on the list is something new that I just wanted to make you all aware of. Through the reverted funds, DES was kind enough to award OEO and the council enough funding to be able to, put together a 2-day summit that will focus on, workforce development, economic development, and education to, intentionally create an environment where we can align and innovate and build a strong foundation for regional economic success. So through this 2-day summit, we will have presentations from the National Governors Association, the National Association of Workforce Boards. They'll talk about not only workforce, but economic development topics. We'll talk about policy, advocacy, and really understand the purpose for the council structure, the board's structure across all 12 local boards, how everything fits together, and even walk away with some best practices on highly performing boards. So I'm very excited about that. We will be sending out a save the date, but if you want to go ahead and mark your calendars in advance, it's going to be June 29th and 30th, and it will be held at the Desert Willow Conference Center. In addition to that save the date, we'll be creating a registration link and hope to have as much representation of workforce economic development and education at the table. We're anticipating about 300 attendees each day. And then last, for projects and events that I think really are taking a priority for our team is ACRC. So as you know, Andy Ridley from the OEO team, he's been really digging into ACRC a little bit more from an employer outreach perspective. And he's been super successful in engaging employers across the state with the program. And he's been recreating the occupational profiles to include on the website to support, employers' efforts. I do want to give a shout out to Yuma County because they have been a tremendous partner. And I think tomorrow they are hosting a webinar where employers or businesses can learn how to benefit from the ACRC program by certifying job candidate skills or upskilling their current teams. And then, of course, they're going to share how the program's assessment tool reduces turnover and optimizes training by integrating it into the hiring process, upskilling current employees or training their new hires. So job well done to Andy, and a shout out to Yuma County for their partnership. So I want to briefly touch on the upcoming National Association of Workforce Boards Conference that's happening March 25th through 28th in DC, just for your general awareness. So I know that I'll be attending, as will many of our local boards, executive directors and staff to the board. I'm actually taking Krista McGarvey from the OEO workforce team with me. And we are very excited because I think it's always very beneficial to learn directly from our national leaders about policy initiatives and trends across the nation, and also give us an opportunity to deepen our understanding of the WIOA law, and then hear practical examples of how it's applied, and ask any questions that we may have to the national network. At that conference, they will be giving out the Trailblazer Awards. And so NOB Awards usually recognize like the most innovative and impactful work being done by workforce development boards and their partners. And so I really want to wish the best of luck to 2 areas that I know submitted for the award this year. If they are awarded, they will gain the award, which will honor their efforts, which provide models for our system when it comes to programs and partnership, which have been transcended or which have transcended the expected and achieved the extraordinary for workers, businesses, and communities. And they really would serve as a leader in adopting the changes envisioned by WIOA. So a huge shout out to both Pinal County and Pima County for submitting for the award this year, and best of luck to both of those areas. And then, as Mark mentioned earlier, we did attend the NGA Winter Symposium last week, actually, not last year. Myself, Robert Garcia, and then Nancy Meaden from the DES team. And it was really beneficial to see how the symposium was able to bring together state leaders to carry out the governor's vision and goals for the workforce development system, strategic investment, and the administration and oversight of the federal and state workforce programs. So thank you all for attending. And I think I don't have any more slides, so I can answer any questions that any of you may have about those projects or conferences.
That's great, Stacey. Any questions?
None for me.
Well, thank you so much, Stacey. That's you can see here just how much the team is doing, and really appreciate your leadership, Stacey, and the entire team. It's just been my great professional pleasure to get to work with this team, and we do frequent calls, and I'm really just excited about the energy and the strategy and the excitement for how we're working together as a state with our local areas. So thank you for that. And please do, if questions come up that you think of all afterwards, please reach out to Stacey or me. And it's exciting 2023, a lot of good opportunity here. Too, just before we move on, I want to say big welcome to Sarah. Looking forward to working with you. And then I see several of our new members on, and I apologize if I miss somebody, but Scott, Sean, Michelle, and Recorder Richard, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
And then I see Supervisor Gates of Executive Committee on as well. And I want to wish a huge good luck and congrats to Pinal and Pima as well. Stacey, thanks for highlighting that. All right. Moving on, we're going to move to a bylaws discussion. Please note there'll be approval to move this agenda item on to full council. After discussion, Kennedy Riley will lead discussion on the bylaws.
Stacy, did you need to go over that last slide before I start?
If I could just quickly take a minute, I apologize.
Yeah.
Mark or Chairman Gaspers, just to update the committee as well on the 2024 to 2027 state
Yeah,
plan
great.
planning in partnership with DES. They have put together kind of a timeline on how the pieces of the state plan will be accomplished. And so I don't need to go through each of these bullets. I just wanted the council to be aware that planning for the state plan is in progress. We are already accomplishing the first bullet, which is the planning and gathering of key data. So we're a little bit ahead of schedule, but it does take about a year to write a 4-year plan because there are so many different partners involved in the process. And so we can expect from a council perspective to see some type of a draft for review around this time next year. But just know that work groups will be formed. There will be a lot of different discussions at each of the council meetings. And so just to give you a heads up that we're in that process, and final submittal will be around March 15th, though we haven't gotten the actual due date from the Department of Labor yet.
Thanks for that, Stacey, and thanks for the timeline. I think that's always helpful. Reminder for those of us that have been on the council for a while, but also for those that are new, you can see kind of the process that's laid out, and super critical in terms of this process because it's tying into our identification as a state of where our in-demand industries and opportunities are for our fellow Arizonans. So thank you to the entire team there. Any questions on this? Okay, Kennedy, over to you. Thank you, Stacey.
Thank you, Chairman. Hello, executive committee members. So we will quickly go over the bylaws updates. I know we have a lot to get through today. So as you're all aware, because we moved from the committee structure over to a work group structure, that caused us to need to make some changes to our bylaws. So we really only made a few major updates. The first being developing a new structure for the executive committee. So we added in the election process for voting for officers, as well as adding in new positions. So now there will be a vice chair, a second vice chair. We'll have our WIOA core title partners represented, and then 3 additional members selected by the chair. And then we updated our language to include the creation of the work group. So next, in a little bit, we'll be talking about the election process and kind of explaining what that's going to look like. So those are the major updates. I can take any questions before you move on to your action, if there are any.
No questions?
Doesn't look like there's any.
Okay. And before the action, just note, I appreciate this approach. Certainly, we want to make sure that we have a broader executive committee structure to be able to have the necessary eyes on all the material that will fall to the executive committee and have the breadth of expertise to that. Obviously, all of our decisions do flow to the full council, but we want to be a proper place to vet and ask the right questions. So thank you for those that are considering that role, which I'm very grateful for. And so we'll decide that next week relative to the actual votes. And I would just say, we've seen from the other states that have similar structures, which I think is very helpful as we build out our Arizona team to have this as well. And we got to know several vice chairs at NGA, and it gives us a further opportunity for our team to extend its reach and learning from others across the country and from national leaders as well. So with that, do I have a motion to approve consideration of the bylaws to the full council meeting next week?
Motion to approve.
Thank you,
Walters.
John. Second?
Second.
Second, Scott Holman.
Okay, I think we'll need it from executive committee. Sorry, Scott.
Second, Michelle
Sorry.
Bolton.
Sorry, Michelle and Scott. We'll have to wait to next week on that. I need a second from either Audrey
Second.
or
Second.
Thank you, Chairman Gates. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those, I didn't hear any opposed. The motion is approved to move consideration of bylaws to full council next week. All right. Moving on. Kennedy will continue with consideration of WAC policies, Workforce Arizona Council policy revisions, and note that there'll be a vote to move this to full council as well.
All right, so I'm just going to quickly go over the 5 policies that we have for review and approval. I wanted to thank all of our local areas for submitting public comment. They were really helpful with our OEO team in making sure that our policies are going to align well as they trickle down to our state or to our local areas. So the policies that we're going to talk about are conflict of interest, the brand style guide, which I know you're all pretty familiar with. I think that policy has been talked about quite a bit. The MOU and IFA, our WIOA statewide monitoring policy, and then our job center structure policy. Next slide, please. So the conflict of interest policy, I'm just going to give you an overview of each policy and then quick updates as to what we changed. So the conflict of interest policy establishes the guidelines for conflict of interest, firewalls and internal controls required under WIOA for our local boards. So this actually wasn't released for public comment because we didn't have any significant changes that were made. We just updated to renumber a policy and add a citation and reviewed to ensure that it was in alignment with WIOA and AZ regulations. Any questions on this one? All right. My next one, sorry about that, is the brand style guide. So provides information and direction required under WIOA regarding how Arizona's workforce system stakeholders must use the Arizona at Work brand. Big thank you to Ken Mall for this. He was instrumental in writing the policy, so shout out to him. So when we released this for public comment, we were able to update the policy to include our Arizona Department of Education staff in the scope. We added in reference in Arizona, one-stop partners are referred to as Arizona at Work partners. And we added in clarifying language to ensure that partners are using branding appropriately. So those were the major changes there. Do I have any questions on that policy? Okay, on to the next, please. So the MOU and IFA, it provides our local workforce boards and our other workforce system partners instruction and guidance regarding Arizona at Work Job Center service delivery. So we had received a lot of public comment on this, so we were able to add in some more comprehensive language regarding the agreement that's developed between the boards, the one-stop partners, and the CEO relating to the overall operation of our one-stop delivery systems in each local area. And then we added some important language to ensure that methods to ensure that all partners of the MOU and IFA comply with the agreed upon initiatives, processes, procedures, and vision as defined by the local board. Are there any questions about this? Okay, next slide, please. All right, our WIOA statewide monitoring policy is important. It establishes the roles of the council, our Arizona Department of Education, Department of Economic Security, ensuring that we're all complying with WIOA and the regulations, our policies, and implementing WIOA as outlined in our state plan. So in this, it includes monitoring information that's used to inform the council about the system status, reporting, and everything else to fulfill its strategic objectives. So we added in some clarifying language regarding Department of Economic Security and Arizona Department of Education monitoring, and then some additional citations and references. Any questions?
Just a quick one, if you don't mind. Did it amend our roles and what our responsibilities are at all?
No, this really outlines how DES and ADE assist the council in fulfilling its roles.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Next slide. And I believe this is our last one. This is the job center structure. And this provides our local boards and other workforce system partners with instruction and guidance of how they administer programs at the job centers and overall service delivery. So we added in some clarifying language regarding job center and one-stop system, clarifying information on career pathways as it relates to employers, and clarifying language regarding electronic delivery and in-person services, really ensuring that electronic services won't replace in-person services, but that they are beneficial and helpful in aiding those. And so if I don't have any questions, I will pass it back over to Chairman Gaspers.
Any questions? Thanks, Kennedy.
Thanks.
Chairman Gaspar, if you don't mind me asking,
Please.
so what did we actually clarify kind of regarding the job center and the one-stop system? What are we trying to clarify? Out of
Yeah,
curiosity?
so some of the language was confusing, kind of making job centers relate to the whole system, but there's so much more than just the job center. So I can pull some language and send it to you after in an email if you'd like, where it kind of breaks down the differences. But I think it was helpful for our local areas to know that the one-stop system, because not every partner is at the job center, it was making sure that it's known that there's a wider range of just those partners that are at the center.
Okay, so it's a little more encompassing,
Yes,
more like an umbrella type idea.
correct.
And then if you don't mind on the side, the career pathways piece would be very interesting. If you don't mind sending me something on the side, I'd appreciate that.
Yes, definitely. I will do that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks, John. Any other questions for Kennedy? Okay. Do I have a motion to move these 5 policies to the full council for consideration?
This is Audrey, so moved.
Thanks, Audrey. Second.
Second,
Thank you, John. I think somebody needs to go on mute. All those in favor say aye.
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 And that's all 4. So the 5 policies will proceed to full council for consideration. Thank you, Kennedy, for all the work on that. Again, we are grateful for this year and the work that was done last year by you. And then thank you to Ken Mall as well, as we continue to make sure that our policies are nationwide standard and also are there to help serve the entire system and not cause confusion. So thank you, Kennedy. Moving on, we're going to consider our election process and nominations, which will take place next week. Kennedy and Aaron will lead discussion regarding that process for vice chair and second vice chair.
Thank you. I'm back again. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about the election process. So because we developed a new structure for the executive committee in the bylaws, that requires us to hold an election so that we can select officers for the seats of the vice chair and the second vice chair. So the one important thing to note is that the positions for vice chair and second vice chair have to be filled by business members to comply with WIOA. So WIOA requires that the chair of the board has to be from the business sector. So the vice chair and the second vice chair, which Aaron will explain a little bit more of their roles, need to come from that. And then going forward, elections will occur at the first regularly scheduled meeting of each calendar year as needed, or if a vacancy occurs, if somebody leaves their officer position, we would need to hold an election to fill that. And the officers that are selected will serve a 3-year term, which is important to note. Are there any questions on the process? I can explain a little bit more of how it will work in the meeting if you'd like to know a little bit more details. Any questions? Okay, Aaron, I'll pass it to you to explain a little bit more.
Thank you, Kennedy. Okay, so as Kennedy mentioned, we will be holding elections at the next full council meeting, which is February 23rd, so it'll be next Thursday. The positions that are open are the vice chair, and the vice chair's duties, they'll perform the chair's duties in the event of the chair's absence at a meeting or in any circumstance where the chair is unable to make it. He will relinquish his duties and his role to the vice chair. And then the other position that's opened is the second vice chair. And in the absence of both the council chair and the vice chair, the second vice chair will then perform all those duties of the chair. Is there any questions? If one pops up later, feel free to email me. Thank you. I'll pass it back over to you, Chairman Gaspers.
And we don't need an additional vote on this, right, Kennedy? Yeah.
No.
So just briefly, I just want to say thanks for consideration of the structure. Again, we're seeing that many other states do have this in place, and it's been very helpful to get to know the breadth of their teams. And the Workforce Arizona Council always does have my first and full dedication, but just knowing illness or other challenges, we want to make sure that we're properly teamed up to have continuation as we move through the quarters, and the breadth of expertise that will come with this. Also, I do appreciate Chair Grove's kind of guidance for me in the past, which I felt more prepared than I would have to be put forward for this position. But similarly, there's just quite a bit of work that does take place outside of these council meetings, and for the chance for us to continue to develop the further deeper understanding of what the system requires and needs from all of our leadership, so that we're a proper support to our entire state and local teams. Any other questions for me or the team? Okay. Moving forward, now I believe we will be on to, thank you, local plan modifications. Stacy will be giving an update, and following that, there'll be a vote to move it on to full council consideration. Stacy?
Thank you, Chairman Gaspers. So I know that we've been talking about the local plan modifications for a couple of different meetings now, but I think we're finally in a place to have some final votes moved to the full council meeting. So as you are aware, back in November, we did conditionally approve Coconino County's local plan modifications, pending that they had to get their CEO's approval and signature. And so they did get that signature in December. And so their plan is being recommended today for full approval. Northeastern Arizona, I know we also teetered back and forth on Northeastern a little bit because they had some setbacks in staffing at their board level. And so they did receive an extension request from the council back in November of 2022. And they were able to meet all of the requirements that we outlined in their extension, and have a final plan that has been approved and signed as of December 13th. So we're recommending their full approval. And then last, we haven't talked much about the 19 tribal nations because, as we're all aware, they have some additional compliance items that they're working through. However, they have been paying very close attention to their local plan and local plan modifications. And I've recently received, or DES recently received a request with more of an outline or a timeline outlined on when we can expect their plan to be submitted. And so they are requesting an extension through March of 2023. However, over the last week or so of February, they do plan to get it out for public comment. They will address any public comments early in March. And then they do have a board meeting on March 8th, where they're hoping to get final approval of their plan to submit over to DES and the council for review, recommendation, or approval on March 10th. And so pending any questions, we would like to turn this back over to you, Chairman Gaspers.
Great. Any questions?
Just one real quick, sir. If I understood everything correctly, that 3/10 date is actually a really good firm date, because I know we've had a lot of discussions on these extensions for the different counties. And did I interpret that correctly?
Yes.
Beautiful. Thank you, ma'am.
Other questions? And huge thank you for the entire team. I know there's work in partnership with our local areas to get to this point, and to the Board of Supervisors for both, and to the 19 tribal nations for the work that continues there. Do I have a motion to approve local plan modifications consideration by 2 full council next Thursday?
So moved.
Thank you, Supervisor Gates. Second.
Second.
Thank you, John. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. And I think I heard all 4. All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Stacy. Now we'll move to Nancy Meenan for Yavapai County, discussion on NACOG in Yavapai County. Please note there'll also be a vote following for moving to full council consideration. Nancy?
Thank you, Chairman Gaspers, and good afternoon. DES had received a request from the Yavapai, the Workforce Development Board, to extend their contract with the NACOG. And we wanted to kind of give you some background as to why we're presenting this today to the council, or for council recommendation. Under WIOA regulations and the council's local governance policy, the board, the local board is may serve as the one-stop operator and the service provider if upon the approval of the council. NACOG, which is the National or the Northern Arizona Council of Governments, is the one-stop operator and provider of services for adults and youth in Yavapai County. But in addition, they are also the employer. They're the employer for the staff to the Yavapai Workforce Development Board, which is pursuant to an employer sharing agreement that was created to help with some of the firewall issues. But nonetheless, they still are the staff to both the board and the service provider. Next slide, please. Now, the original contract between the Yavapai Board and NACOG ended on June 30th. And last spring, DES did agree to an extension until December of 2022 to allow for a continuum of services to the citizens of Yavapai County, because there was a health emergency with the consultant they were using for the procurement process. And they had anticipated having it completed by just in the 6-month period. But in late November, the board contacted DES asking for another extension, as they had undergone 2 competitive procurements, which closed with no responses. We did at DES, talking with OEO, we did agree to an extension through March, again, to allow for the continuation of services, but we also asked them to provide us with a plan on how their plan to move forward on this matter. We also informed Yavapai that we would need to bring this matter to the council for approval because of the fact that the staff to the board, NACOG serving in the dual roles there. Next slide, please. So they, as requested, the Yavapai board submitted a plan, and DES, after consulting with OEO, agrees with the plan, which would extend the current contract to ensure continuation of services. And that extension is through June 30th of 2023. They would also have a request for proposal with, and actually it said on March the 1st, the slide says March the 1st through, and with the responses due on April 1st, but they actually opened it up this week. I think it was on the 15th, and the responses are due on March the 22nd. So they're actually ahead of schedule for that RFP being opened. And then after the approval by the Workforce Development Board and the Board of Supervisors, they would review those proposals and negotiate a new agreement no later than May 31st, which would, for services to begin on the 1st of July. And then, we agreed with that implementation plan, and but since again, with NACOG as the staff to the board, we are, and also the service provider, we're requesting the council approval for this extension. And Terry Drew is present and she would be available also to answer any questions too.
Any questions for Nancy or Terry?
Now, this is Audrey. I feel comfortable if DES agrees that they review this plan and they are comfortable with the extension.
We are.
Yeah, we just want to make sure that it's, again, in full compliance with the new policies and procedures that we're looking to review. And as long as they're in full compliance with the policies that we're going to move to the full board at the next meeting, that I'm comfortable with it as well. That would be my only concern, making sure that it's in compliance with the new guidelines that we're going to be looking at.
Yes, we're very comfortable, Ms. Bohannon, with the plan that they had presented.
Thank you, Audrey. Any other questions? Okay. Then do I have a excuse me, move to approve, a motion to approve the requests for extension for consideration at the full council meeting.
This is Audrey, so moved.
Thank you, Audrey. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Chairman or Supervisor Gates. All those in favor say aye.
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 And that's all for motion passes. Thank you, Nancy. And thank you for the team in Yavapai and NACOG for the work with DES. Okay. Make sure I have the right place. Nancy Meany will continue to join us here and lead a discussion on statewide performance.
Thank you again. And this is where I get to wear my geek hat a little bit. So I hope I try to get not too much into the weeds on this one. This slide indicates the there's all the performance indicators that all 6 programs under WIOA, the core programs, and the 6 core indicators that eventually all of the that will need to be met in order to be considered to be meeting performance, and for the state to be meeting performance and not subject to the sanction provisions that are in WIOA. There's as you can see on the sheet, there's a total of 36, well, actually 34, excuse me, indicators that the state will need to meet, as well as meeting, as you see the ones at the top and the bottom. There's one, across the board, we also have a score for each specific indicator for all titles, as well as there's an overall score for each program. So as I said, it can get kind of technical here, so bear with me here. And if you have any questions, please do not, please let me know. DOL and Department of Education had planned an incremental approach beginning with the program year of 2020, which was, that's the year that started July the 1st of 2020, in which they were going to assess some indicators for both PY 20 and 21, and it would be for pretty much all the titles. They were going to assess some indicators. However, and then they were going to plan all indicators were going to be reviewed starting in PY 22, which is the year we're in now, that will be ending in June 30th. But due to the impact of COVID and some other issues with how performance is to be assessed at the national level, they notified DOL and DOE, both notified the states in October of 21 that for PY 20 and PY 21, only Title I and Title III, which is Title I is the adult dislocated worker and youth, and Title III being the Wagner-Pfizer, would be assessed. There would not be any assessment for Titles II and IV in those years. As a side note, I just also wanted to note that if you'll notice, the second to the last group thing has effective, this indicator is the effectiveness in serving employers. But DOL and DOE have not defined this indicator, and so it will not be assessed until it is defined. You may recall we shared the definition proposed by DOL and DOE during the committee meetings in the fourth quarter of 2022. But that at this point, that is still being defined, and we will not be assessed even in the upcoming program year. Next slide, please. So for, again, program year 20 and 21, each individual indicator that were for the scores assessed under Title 1 and 3 had to be what they call it a score of 50% or above, and I'll explain that in a minute. In the future, those overall program scores, the ones at the very end and at the bottom, will also they'll have to have a 90% or higher, but that again did not count for this past year, and we're not being assessed that way. Next slide, please. So for PY21, the state was assessed on these 8 indicators, which are the employment rate at the second quarter after a participant exits, and the median earnings for the second quarter, for the full quarter after exit, and that would be for the adult dislocated workers and youth and the Wagner-Pfizer or otherwise the employment service. So next slide, please. So how did Arizona do? Well, if you look in the green boxes, and this was a chart that DOL provided for us, green means good. Green means we met, based on the assessment, we met all indicators. And you'll notice like the top box of each, top number percentage point in each box represents the actual score. And those have to be above 50%. And those were used for that's the score used for the assessment. If you'll notice on the bottom left of each box is the actual performance, and the number in the bottom right is the negotiated level. That's the level that DOL used based on their model and says this is where we expect the state to perform. And so for instance, for the adult, the first box, the negotiated level, what they expected out of us was 74.2%. Our actual performance was 68.5%. So that's how the score, and so that's the difference, is the score is the difference here. It's 92, we met 92.2% of the expectation. And if you notice on the bottom level, we exceeded expectations on the wages, which is really good. Our wages were higher than what they were expected to be. So again, for the adults, you'll see that they were expecting us to have the adults to earn, coming out of the programs the second quarter after exit, they were expected to earn $6,222 for a quarter. That's the full quarter, but we actually earned, the adults actually earned $7,990. And those are, that information, by the way, is obtained through a matching with the unemployment system and the wages that are in the unemployment system. So, all right. So next slide, please. What we're going to do is what's next? We will be assessing, we're going to talking to OEO, and we're going to be assessing and reviewing these same measure indicators with the local areas, and to review local performance, because now we have to determine whether the locals met their performance for PY21. And then and once we're going to be having those conversations within the next month with the local areas, and we are using, as I said, the same 6 indicators that we were assessed, we will assess our local areas for our local areas assessments. So good job, everybody. We did well. Any questions?
questions? I will just say thank you, Nancy, and that color chart was actually very helpful. So thank you walking us through that. You know, certainly that was still a challenging time in the nation and the economy. And so reflecting that, great to see where we are with those numbers, and it will be interesting to see tracking going forward, and specifically with the local areas. But in addition, it's great context as we're working through developing our state plan. Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much, Nancy. Stacy will give an update on our strategic plan work group, and there will be a vote to move this forward for consideration to full council. Stacy.
Thank you, Chairman Gaspers. So if you all recall our previous conversations about our council structure and inclusion of work groups, the strategic plan work group is our very first work group. And really the purpose of this work group is to develop a plan that is really specific to the goals and initiatives and priorities of our council, but keeping in mind that those items will ultimately drive the conversations or some of the items or strategies that are selected to focus on for our 4-year state plan. So I like to tell everybody that it's kind of a playbook for how we will write the much larger version of the state plan for our state. I had sent out an email to everyone for full transparency to see who would like to join this work group, and I am pleased with the response that we received. We do have representation from a couple of our workforce development boards, DES, there are a few council members on the team, and then we do have representation of titles 1 through 4 and business services on these calls. We're holding weekly meetings right now because we have a lot to accomplish before we can actually start to write the strategic plan, which I don't anticipate will be a very long document, but it will outline what our goals are and what our expected outcomes are. The team was really interested in understanding the landscape here in Arizona. So for the first couple of meetings, we did spend some time talking about local plans and how they tied into the state plan. And if a board had a strategic plan separately from their local plan, what did those look like? And then we also took some time to review the state plan and the state plan modifications leading up to 2024. One of the things that the work group needed to focus on first to really make sure that we were going in the right direction and could support the priorities of the council was our mission and vision statement. So I'm not going to read the old mission and vision statement, but we quickly grouped together and determined if those should remain, or based on what we want to accomplish over the next couple of years, should they be changed with a little bit more of a focus. So I'll give you a minute to read through the old mission and vision before we change slides. Aaron, do you want to go ahead and go to the next slide? So as you can see with the revised mission and vision statement, we did condense them down a little bit, but still, a strong focus on what we want to accomplish and where we want to gear our efforts as a council for the next couple of years. So our mission is now the recommended mission, if you will, to develop and support an equitable workforce system that connects business, education, and job seekers that results in a healthy or prosperous, we really couldn't decide if we wanted to go with healthy or prosperous economy in Arizona. And then our vision is to create a future where every Arizonan has the opportunity to reach their full potential through access to meaningful employment and fulfilling careers, driving the economic growth and prosperity of our communities. What was really important to the work group was that we made sure that both the mission and vision, I apologize, one moment. My doorbell was ringing, so my dogs are going crazy. But the intent was really to ensure that our mission and vision covered each of the populations that we serve. And so we wanted to make sure we included language to touch each of those populations. And I will pause there and ask if there are any questions about the recommended revised mission and vision before I hand it over to Chairman Gaspers.
Just a quick one for myself. The word equitable, I think, is beautiful, but there's a lot of interpretations for it. So do we think about the practical application of equitable, and then what is that going to look like?
So I don't want to speak on behalf of the work group, but I would love to invite one of the work group members to address John's question, if anybody wants to take a stab.
This is Kristen. I'll do a quick, around our conversations, we wanted to make sure that individuals with barriers to employment, individuals with low education, individuals with disabilities, individuals from underserved communities, that we are making sure that we put the focus on equitable access to the system. And so really wanted to make sure that we captured everybody that we should be serving within the mission. So that was the equitable piece. It was more towards making sure that we are driving our efforts to ensure that anyone can get into the workforce system and have access to those. Yeah, and Nydia is saying inclusion as well from an inclusive perspective.
I love what you said. So beautifully stated. So do we want to add the word inclusion on that, or she was just adding that?
I'm not opposed. I don't know what other, but it could be equitable, inclusive, or support an inclusive workforce system.
But I'm not trying to rewrite your work, so my apologies.
No. And I appreciate your comments, John. What we wanted to do was just recommend this, but we all have the understanding that the executive committee may want to make some slight changes to the mission and vision. So if you do want to make some wording changes, just let us know. We'll document that and then make sure that that's the mission and vision that is shared at the full council meeting.
Thank you, ma'am.
This is Audrey. The question I would have is if the full council reviews it and they want to make adjustments, they will still have the opportunity to make adjustments to the language.
Yes, good question, Audrey. They would.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the more eyes that are on it, the more perspectives you will hear. And so I love that it is a work in progress. So I think it's a great place to start. It may not be where we end. And I think as long as we share it that way and that folks on the full board know that they do have an option to include their voices.
Thank you, Audrey. Any other comments or action?
The Chair Gaspers, the only thought here is that it seems to be a little focused on employees or potential employees, and I'm not seeing a lot about employers, and I think this is a two-way street. So just one thought, maybe if we can bolster that, because I think that's an important part of our mission and vision as well.
I appreciate that, Supervisor Gates. I had that same thought. I feel like in the mission it does reflect it with the Connects business, but we might want to consider some language. And I don't know that we need to wordsmith it here, but maybe if the team could take that consideration for the vision, and we could have the full council take it up as an amendment if needed.
Unless
Thank
you
you.
want, can we push it back to the work group and ask them to add some language in there? Because that's what
great
my
idea.
gut tells me. push it back to the work group, ask the work group to look at the employer piece, as well as look at the prosperous, and is there a need to address equitable versus inclusion versus any other words. And I would ask those specific questions to the work group, and then maybe they can come back to us even before the meeting.
So we actually have a work group meeting this afternoon at 3 o'clock, directly following this meeting. So we can definitely pay attention to that first before we jump into our agenda. And then we can send out an email to the executive team with your feedback and approval, and then we can get that on the agenda for the full council meeting. So, but today we would probably need to conditionally approve that we will put at least a revised mission and vision in front of the full council next week.
Great, but Audrey, great timing on the working group meeting right after this meeting. So let me see if I can state this right. Do I have a motion to approve the mission and statement and vision statement be moved to the full council following consideration by the work group of executive committee recommendations? Hopefully I stated that right.
So moved. This is Audrey.
Thank you, Audrey.
Second, Walters.
Thank you, John. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. And I think all four. Thank you all, everybody. And thank you especially to our working group, our first work group, for the great work that you all are doing and participation. I think this is exactly how we get to the strategic level of engagement that we all need, and to our council members for all their time. And so excited to see what comes of it for next week. Thank you, Stacy. Moving on to, I believe, labor market in demand industries. Rachel Tashbrook will be leading a discussion regarding labor market in demand industries. Please note there'll be a vote for consideration by the full council. Rachel and Kennedy, sorry.
Thank you. Well, hello, everyone. For those of you I haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name is Rachel Tashbrook, and I am an economist with the Office of Economic Opportunity on the Economic Analysis team. I appreciate the workforce team bringing me in to work with them and support the Strategic Planning Committee with trying to identify some in-demand industries, which we'll talk about today. In-demand is used as a lay term across a lot of different groups, a lot of different people trying to work in workforce support or education. We use this term with the high school career and technical education team, but it's interesting because for the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act and for the state and local workforce boards, there's actually a very specific definition as to what these need to be and who selects these industries. So in the WIOA system, an in-demand industry needs to have current or potential impact on state, regional, and local economy that contributes to the growth or stability of other supporting businesses. And I put the specific definition that's in the regulation on the screen in case folks want to get the exact language. And this matters to the Workforce Council, one, because the Workforce Council is tasked with the responsibility of identifying the in-demand industries and occupations for the state, and two, because it has a significant impact in the work that we as a system try to accomplish. If you don't mind going to the next slide. So there are a lot of different ways that the in-demand industries impact the work that's being done and even the makeup of the board. So first, it helps determine our workforce board membership. The business representatives on the board do need to be from in-demand industries. It helps us focus our statewide employer engagement efforts. So when the Employer Engagement Administration within the Department of Economic Security has their meetings and they're looking at, data for specific industries, or they're wanting to reach out to new businesses that they haven't reached out to before, a lot of that will be based in the in-demand industries. I always do like to emphasize that this is not saying that the system will not support industries not identified as in demand. We definitely are very inclusive as a system, but it means when we are, looking at special projects to start or special new initiatives and really focusing resources, there's some value and strategy behind focusing on the in-demand industries. We can also use them to help create targeted career pathways for all WIOA participants. So if there's going to be special projects, say, working between Title II, which has folks in the adult education system, and maybe Title I, who can provide additional educational resources and higher education using their funding. It's helpful if we have focused industries so that these groups can partner on them to try and help people build their career pathway within these industries. As well, probably the largest area, or one of the larger areas of impact, is that it helps us determine our industries of focus when we develop our strategies for meeting the needs of employers, workers, and job seekers. We've talked a lot about local plans and state plans on this call, and the state selected in-demand industries will really help us when we're identifying strategies for the state plan. And similarly, the local boards will be identifying locally important industries, which they'll write about for their local plan and include in their strategy development. If you don't mind going to the next slide. Thank you. So far, what's happened is the economic analysis team, so the unit I'm on, we develop on a regular basis some analysis on industries. We use the NAICS system, which is supported by the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics, and we analyze information on employment projections, historic employment growth, wages, things like that, and we develop an industry ranking. So if everyone looked at their calendar invite for today, you can see the analysis that we provided. It's the spreadsheet called Industry Rankings Arizona. And we provide the rankings for each industry by variable. So if let's say the board wanted to focus on wages, for example, you could look at what industries are providing the highest wages, or if you wanted to look at the fastest growing industries, you could see what the rank is for what industries are growing the fastest. You could also look at what industries are maybe the largest. There's value in supporting some of Arizona's larger employers, things like that. And so this data was provided to the strategic work group. Sorry, one more thing I want to say on that spreadsheet. The first column is an overall ranking. That ranking just looks at what the total rank, like if you were just to say all of the variables are considered the same, you considered historic growth and location quotient, all of these of equal weight, it ranks all the industries. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the board needed to follow that rank. We firmly believe that there's value in having this discussion and figuring out what variables are most important. And so that's why we brought it to the strategic work group and to the council today to discuss and figure out which industries to include. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kennedy. We talked a little bit about the strategic planning group, but she'll just share again how they talked about it and give it to y'all for discussion.
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, so as she mentioned, this was a big topic of our strategic work group plan. So we were really lucky to have our title partners represented, our boards represented, our business services team represented. So we had really robust and engaged conversations surrounding the information that Rachel brought to our team. We were able to get input from our business team, letting us know, who are they working with now? What jobs do they see coming here? So that was really helpful to us. So these were the 7 industries that we decided to bring forward to the executive committee and full council for some discussion. And as you'll see, retail is highlighted. And retail trade is one item that the work group thought maybe some more discussion may need to happen around. So we selected this as a potential option to ensure that we're including all WIOA populations. And this was based on input from our title partners. So, I won't speak directly for Title IV. I know Kristen's on the call, but we, from what we heard is that, individuals who are in the Title IV services may start out in a lower wage job, or it's a great starting point for them to develop workplace skills. So the overall wages potentially would be lower, but we felt that it was important to include that industry because it's going to directly impact our clients in that title. So it's also important to know, I think Rachel mentioned this, that there's always going to be opportunities for our participants, no matter what industries we pick. We can always look at top jobs by our education level, and that could also help accommodate that need. So I think we'd love to hear some feedback or discussion on the industries presented. And I think Rachel can also help answer any data specific questions as well.
Absolutely.
Any questions?
And to kind of expand on the point Kennedy was making, I think really a lot of the debate was coming down to, given limited resources with Title I and stuff, do we want to focus on retail when it does have lower wages? Or do we think it's an important enough industry that we still want to be focusing on it? There are a couple different ways we could go about it. Because we identify in-demand industries and occupations, we could have, for example, a broader list of in-demand industries and then be very specific about what occupations we're going to consider in demand and maybe only pick the cream of the crop in each industry. Or another idea is we could be more specific with the industries, only pick the industries that we think are most important at this point, or not most because they're all important, but the ones that need our support the most, I would say. And then we could be a little bit more broad in the occupations that we're picking for those industries and work on building the career ladders that way. So that there's a couple different ways that
Yeah.
go about this.
Thanks for teeing up that way. I certainly have my opinion on it. That I would say that the focus should be on in-demand industries and not occupations when you consider the range of potential change in your career path and growth that happens across your potential various occupations within companies. And it's to say too, I don't know that, like, looking at it from a company perspective, that I would say that any particular occupation is more or less valuable, in one sense that I know there's certainly skill sets we want to develop, but I think I have a preference on focusing on the in-demand piece. I feel like I have to dig in more detail on the retail question, so I wouldn't personally have a problem moving it forward with it, which will give us as executive committee with this context to dig into the data on it that you provided further. Last thing I guess I'll say is I appreciate how it's structured on NAICS codes, the right way to do it. But there, people can see then there's quite a bit of breadth within those categories, which is, I don't see as a bad thing. And it's inclusive of a lot of dynamic activity that's happening across the industries that you've identified there. So I'll stop talking. And other executive committee comment or questions?
I think as you have it presented here, it definitely follows the mission and vision as it was restated a couple slides ago. So I think that's good. I do personally struggle a little bit on the retail piece. For my mind, when I think about who do we, as far as industries, really want to focus on, it's ones that in my mind I can support a family, or we can support an individual where they're able to launch and then obviously not be on any kind of state resources to be able to provide for families and whatnot. So for me, obviously I do have some biases from industries that are also less sensitive to the economy, from like IT, that's not going anywhere. Obviously that's a booming, the finance, insurance and whatnot, healthcare, that's just going to continue to explode. So I definitely have some preferences in full disclosure. I'd like to say I'm neutral, but we both know none of us are as we think about it. I think the other component though to consider is, if healthcare is doing great, then we need construction jobs to bring it along, right? We've got to be able to build the infrastructure for them. So I think really weaving that vision in for everybody is super helpful. And if you tie the retail into that, I think we might be able to pull it off. But otherwise, retail really seems more like a gateway to move into some of the other roles. And it's really meant to be, like you said, to get somebody, maybe off the streets or from some of their other roles into a more sustainable career. Just kind of my 2 cents.
And just quickly, John, I'll echo that we've heard in a variety of different forums on the construction piece, echoing what you said, that's critical and being seen as instrumental for the other industries that are identified there.
you know, this is Audrey. I think there's so much overlap between all of them, right? Because if it's retail, yeah, you have to have some construction. And there will be people that are working in the financial component of retail. And those folks will need healthcare and social assistance and all that retail item. They need to be warehoused and transported. So, I mean, there is such overlap, right? And everything that's in retail has to be manufactured somewhere. And then how do you manage and track all that inventory and keep it secure? Then you've got your information technology. So it's, I mean, one doesn't stand alone. And I don't know if it's been added there simply because of the volume of individuals and employers that are in, and the revenue associated with that piece. So I don't know, it's an
I can speak to
interesting.
that.
Yeah.
If that helps, only just because we did the rankings. The reason why it ranked well on the original list was exactly because of that. It was the number of people employed. And that was really the core reason it made it that high on the list. If it weren't for that, it ranked fairly low in other categories, but because it's such a large industry. The other reason why I think it ranked higher than it would in other years is because we do incorporate recent employment growth and upcoming employment projections. And the industry saw a lot of losses during the pandemic. And so that made it look like the industry has been growing faster the last 2 years than if you didn't consider how many jobs it laid off in the previous 4 years. So it does look a little bit like it is a faster industry because of that unique situation. And that's how it ended up being high on the rankings this year.
So what would, my question would be, what would the impact be if we did not include retail?
So if you did not include retail, I would say folks would still be able to be partnered into the retail industry. Like if somebody were to go into a job center and they'd be able to find a job with retail, if a retail employer is needing help, my understanding is that they would still be able to receive assistance. It would really just be more on the strategic planning side, that when we're focusing, you know, let's say the council wanted to have a focused convening on one of the in-demand industries, or when the employer engagement administration is trying to figure out new employers to reach out to, it's really on that strategy side that would be focusing on the in-demand industries. But if other folks on the call have a different experiences, let me know. That's just how I'm interpreting it.
Listening to what Audrey said, and I love how she captured it, where each one's interconnected to the other night, and I think you beautifully articulated that. Where my mind went when you were talking was, okay, is there 2 or 3 of these, because resources are limited, everything's limited in life. So are there 2 or 3 of these that we can really focus on, that you build it and the others will come, right? The others will follow. So if I pour all my energy into these 3, then I know retail will have to blossom, because that will naturally come into play, versus if I build a bunch of retail, does that really bring in the finance or the health or the transportation, right? And so that's kind of where my mind went when you were thinking about that, or when you were articulating that, I mean.
Great discussion. Any other? Well, I think this is exactly the kind of discussion that we were hoping for council. So thank you for that, and thank you for the great context, Rachel. What I'd like to do, to recommend, but open to comment here before we move forward, is that we move all of those identified here and highlighted retail forward to full council, and then particularly to help provide the context of this discussion to the rest of council, and not shy away from that, to give them that background and what we considered, and then we'll have additional eyes and ears and insight to proceed with that consideration. So I will just go ahead and make a motion, but feel free to oppose it. Do I have a motion to move the Strategic Council Working Group recommendations as listed on our screen for consideration by full council?
This is Audrey, so moved.
Thanks, Audrey. Second?
Second.
Thanks, John. All those in favor say aye.
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 That's unanimous. Moves forward. Thank you for the great discussion. We'll be digging into the data even further as we consider it next week. And this is exactly the kind of robust discussion we want to have that helps inform the strategy of our system. So perfect and great job, Rachel.
Thank you.
All right. Workforce Arizona Council agenda for next week. Do any of the council members have any changes that they would like to make to the agenda? I don't know if you can see, it's an eye test on mine, but I know we have it in our documents. Or any final remarks before we close the meeting? With that, do I have a motion to approve the agenda for the full council meeting?
Motion
So
to
moved.
approve.
It's first and second. Second. Okay, I've
I'll
got a
take the second, sir.
Thanks. All those in favor. So Supervisor Gates first and then second. John, all those in favor say aye.
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 That's unanimous. The agenda is approved. And just so again, reminder, our first quarter full Workforce Arizona Council meeting will be held Thursday, February 23rd from 1 to 3 p.m. in the afternoon. In particular, I will be there in person. I look forward to seeing as many of you, both of council members and public, that can attend in person, again at the ACA office on 7th Avenue in the main conference room. But certainly we have this Zoom option available for access to individuals who are unable to travel there in person. But if you can, we'd love to see you, but we'll see you virtually if not. And with that, do I have a motion to adjourn Executive Committee first quarter meeting?
This is Audrey, so moved.
Thank you, Audrey. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Supervisor Gates. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. I believe I heard all but opposed. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for the great discussion today and the great work that's happened, and we will see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.